Imagine Los Angeles, June 1994. The city is warm, the streets alive. The air carrying that unmistakable California energy. Celebrities dine in Beverly Hills, tourists crowd Hollywood Boulevard. And television screens flicker with reruns of sitcoms and late-night hosts cracking jokes. It feels like any ordinary summer night in America's entertainment capital. But in one quiet neighborhood, beneath the glow of street lamps and the shadows of palm trees, something unthinkable is about to happen. An act of violence, so brutal it will shake the nation and turn one of its most beloved sports heroes into the face of the most controversial trial in modern history. This is the story of O.J. Simpson, a football legend, a movie star, a man adored by millions. And yet, in the eyes of many, a man guilty of one of the most shocking crimes America has ever witnessed. Before the trial, before the white Bronco chase, before the circus of cameras and lawyers there was the crime scene, a hidden horror behind the gates of Nicole Brown Simpson's condo. It was just past midnight, June 12, 1994. Nicole had spent the evening at a family dinner. Friends described her mood as light, relaxed, happy. She returned home to her condo on Bundy Drive, not knowing that death was waiting only steps away. A few minutes later, her neighbor's dog, a small, fluffy Akita, began to bark. Not the playful bark of a happy pet, but a frantic, desperate cry. The dog's paws were soaked in something dark, something red. When neighbors followed the dog, they stumbled upon a scene that would scar their memories forever. Nicole Brown Simpson lay at the foot of the stairs, brutally murdered. Her throat had been slashed so deep it was nearly decapitation. Just a few feet away lay Ron Goldman, a young waiter, stabbed multiple times after what seemed like a desperate struggle for his life. The ground was splattered with blood, footprints marked the walkway, and a single black glove was left behind, a clue that would later become infamous. The brutality shocked even seasoned detectives. This was not a clean killing. It was rage, fury, almost personal. Whoever had done this had unleashed not just violence, but something darker, hatred. By dawn, Los Angeles police had sealed off the crime scene. Reporters began to gather. And as the news spread, whispers quickly turned into shouts, "Where is O.J.?" Because Nicole wasn't just any victim. She was O.J. Simpson's ex-wife. And their history was anything but simple. O.J. had been a national treasure, one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, known as the Juice. He had speed, charm, charisma. He transitioned effortlessly into acting, commercials, and sports commentary. America loved him. But behind closed doors, Nicole's friends and family knew a different story. They had seen bruises. They had heard arguments. Police had even been called to their home years before for domestic abuse. Nicole once confided in friends that she was afraid that one day O.J. would kill her. And now she was dead. Detectives immediately turned their eyes to O.J. Simpson. That morning, when police reached his estate, he wasn't there. His white Ford Bronco sat in the driveway, but O.J. himself was gone. Officers noticed drops of blood leading from the vehicle toward the house. Inside, they found more traces of blood. And in the backyard, they found something chilling, another black glove matching the one left at the murder scene. It was the beginning of what would become known as the trial of the century. But first, The world had to watch O.J. Simpson run not on the football field, but from the law. The stage was set, a gruesome double murder, a famous suspect, and a nation glued to every detail. The media swarmed Los Angeles like sharks. Every headline screamed O.J.'s name. Every television station prepared for the story that would dominate for months, even years. America had never seen anything like it. And as the walls began to close in, O.J. made a choice that would change his legacy forever. June 17, 1994, just 5 days after the brutal murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, Los Angeles was buzzing like never before. Television crews had already set up permanent camps outside O.J. Simpson's Brentwood estate. Reporters hounded his lawyers. And America waited for the next development in what was fast becoming the most shocking criminal case of the decade. That morning, the Los Angeles District Attorney announced that O.J. Simpson would be charged with 2 counts of murder. The announcement was explosive. A football hero, a movie star, a man whose smile had sold millions of products now accused of killing the mother of his children. The LAPD expected Simpson to surrender himself quietly. His lawyer, Robert Shapiro, assured police that O.J. would turn himself in at Parker Center. Downtown, by 11 a.m., the world's cameras were ready to capture the dramatic moment. But 11 a.m. came and went, and O.J. Simpson never showed up. At first, confusion, then panic. O.J. had vanished. By mid-afternoon, prosecutors and detectives went public. O.J. Simpson was officially a fugitive. The media swarmed with speculation. Where was he? Had he fled the state? Was he planning to escape the country? At 5 p.m., everything changed. O.J. was spotted. A white Ford Bronco, owned by his longtime friend and former teammate Al Cowlings, was cruising down the highways of Southern California. And inside, in the passenger seat, was O.J. Simpson. What happened next was unlike anything America had ever seen. Police cars began to follow the Bronco. News helicopters zoomed in, broadcasting the chase live across the nation. Suddenly, the country's regular programming and BA finals, sitcom reruns, evening news was interrupted with one surreal image, a slow-speed car chase. A white Bronco gliding down the freeway, trailed by a sea of flashing police lights. 95 million Americans tuned in that night. Families gathered in living rooms, bars switched their televisions, even stadiums announced updates to the crowd. America was glued to the sight of O.J. Simpson running not with the power and grace of his football days, but in a desperate, bizarre escape. Inside the Bronco, tension boiled. Al Cowlings, driving nervously, had called 911 himself. His voice shook as he told dispatchers, "My friend in the car, O.J., he's got a gun to his head. He's threatening to kill himself. Please, don't do anything to scare him." Police were ordered to keep their distance. This wasn't a high-speed pursuit, it was a rolling standoff, broadcast in real time. On the freeway, drivers pulled over, waving signs and cheering O.J. as the Bronco passed. Others booed. America was split in real time. Was O.J. a murderer running from justice, or a broken man overwhelmed by grief and fear? Meanwhile, back at Simpson's home, crowds gathered. Neighbors, fans, reporters, and police all waited, watching television screens for updates. By 8 p.m., the Bronco finally made its way back to Brentwood. Helicopters buzzed overhead. SWAT teams took position. The mansion was surrounded. Inside the Bronco, O.J. sat with his .357 Magnum, holding photographs of his family, a passport, and a disguise kit. He had written what many believed to be a suicide note. Hours of negotiation followed. Police begged him to surrender. His lawyers pleaded over the phone. His friend Al Callings cried as he tried to calm him down. Finally, at 8:50 p.m., the tension broke. O.J. Simpson stepped out of the Bronco and walked slowly toward his home. The manhunt, the chase, the standoff, it was over. He was arrested and taken into custody. That night, America exhaled. But the story was only beginning. The chase had elevated the case from a Los Angeles tragedy to a global spectacle. The sight of O.J. Simpson's white Bronco rolling down the freeway would become one of the most iconic images of the 1990s, and behind that image lay deeper questions. Was O.J. a murderer? Or was he being targeted because of his fame, his race, his past? The stage was set for a trial that would not only determine O.J. Simpson's fate, but would expose America's deepest divides: race, celebrity, media, and justice itself. The next act would be the courtroom, the lawyers, the witnesses, the infamous glove. The trial of the century was about to begin. January 24th, 1995, the day the trial officially opened. Los Angeles had never seen anything like it. Neither had America. Inside the downtown courthouse, rows of reporters crammed into press seats, their notebooks and cameras ready. The case was already being called the trial of the century, not because of its legal complexity, but because of its cultural impact. This wasn't just about O.J. Simpson anymore. It was about celebrity, about race, about America's obsession with crime, and about whether one man, beloved by millions, could have brutally murdered the mother of his children. O.J. entered the courtroom looking calm, collected, even confident. He wore tailored suits, flashed polite smiles, and occasionally glanced at the jury. He knew the cameras were rolling. He wasn't just on trial, he was performing for an audience of millions. The prosecution, led by Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, wasted no time in painting a chilling picture. They argued that O.J. Simpson was a man who lived a double life. To the public, he was charming, successful, charismatic. But behind closed doors, they said, he was violent, controlling, and obsessed with Nicole. Clark told the jury, this is a case about a man who could not let go. A man who loved control more than he loved anything else. And when he lost that control, he killed. Her words hung heavy in the courtroom. The defense, led by the now legendary Dream Team, had a very different story. Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, and Alan Dershowitz, some of the most famous lawyers in America, stood united behind O.J. Their strategy: attack the evidence. Attack the police, attack the system itself. Johnny Cochran declared, O.J. Simpson is an innocent man. He is the victim of a rush to judgment. And we will show you how the LAPD planted, mishandled, and manipulated evidence to frame him. The battle lines were drawn. The jury, carefully selected after weeks of questioning, was unlike any in recent history. 12 men and women, mostly black, tasked with deciding the fate of a man who was both a sports hero and a murder suspect. Every day, they sat silently, watching the lawyers spar, the witnesses speak, the evidence unfold. And the world watched with them. Television stations broadcast every second. Millions of Americans tuned in daily. Water coolers in offices buzzed with theories. Families argued in living rooms. OJ's trial wasn't just news, it was entertainment, drama, and obsession rolled into one. Early testimony hit hard. Neighbors described hearing Nicole's dog barking relentlessly the night of the murders. Others recalled seeing a mysterious figure near her home. Blood experts testified that samples found in OJ's car matched Nicole's DNA. Then came the gloves. One glove was found at Nicole's condo, soaked in blood. The other at OJ's estate. Prosecutors declared them to be damning evidence. If both gloves were OJ's, the case was practically sealed, but the defense saw an opening. The most dramatic moment came when prosecutor Christopher Darden asked O.J. Simpson to try on the gloves in front of the jury. The courtroom went silent as O.J. tugged at the leather, his hands straining. The gloves looked too small. And then came Johnny Cochran's legendary line. Words that would echo through history if it doesn't fit. You must acquit. That phrase became the rallying cry of the defense, a soundbite that traveled through every television, every headline, every conversation in America. The trial stretched on for months. Witness after witness, expert after expert, every detail dissected, every theory debated. The prosecution hammered on OJ's history of domestic violence. Friends recalled Nicole's fear, her cries for help. The defense countered by putting the LAPD on trial, accusing Detective Mark Foreman of racism and corruption. When Foreman was caught lying on the stand, the defense's narrative grew stronger. For the jury, it was a storm of information, emotion, and spectacle. For America, it was a mirror reflecting not just a case, but the country's deepest struggles, trust in the police, the power of fame, the line between justice and entertainment. By the summer of 1995, the trial was still far from over. But one thing was certain. This was no longer just about Nicole and Ron. It was about O.J. Simpson versus America itself. And the verdict was still months away. October 3rd, 1995, after 9 long months of testimony, cross-examinations, and endless television coverage. The O.J. Simpson trial had finally reached its climax. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours, a shockingly short time given the mountain of evidence. The months of arguments and the lives forever altered. Inside the Los Angeles County Superior Court, the atmosphere was electric. Reporters filled every seat. Television cameras pointed like rifles, broadcasting the moment, lived to over 150 million people, one of the largest television audiences in history. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a national event. O.J. Simpson sat at the defense table, dressed in a dark suit and tie, his hands folded. His face was calm, but his eyes darted nervously. Behind him, members of his dream team, Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, waited with quiet confidence. Across the aisle, prosecutors Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden sat stone-faced. They had fought for months to present a case they believed was airtight. But they also knew the defense had struck powerful blows, especially with the infamous glove demonstration and the scandal surrounding Detective Mark Foreman. The air was thick with tension. As Judge Lance Ito entered the courtroom, silence fell. He reminded the audience of courtroom decorum, though everyone knew emotions were about to erupt. The clerk rose, holding the jury's written verdict. The room seemed to stop breathing. All rise. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable, no hints, no clues. The world leaned closer. The clerk unfolded the paper and began to read. In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, we the jury find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder. The courtroom exploded. O.J. gasped, his knees nearly buckling. He mouthed, "Oh my God." His attorneys embraced him, their months of strategy culminating in the ultimate victory. Nicole Brown, Simpson's family, sat in shock, their faces crumpling with grief. Ron, Goldman's father, Fred, clenched his fists, shaking with rage. To them, justice had been denied. Outside, the reactions were split across America. In black communities across Los Angeles and beyond, cheers erupted. Many saw the verdict as a rare victory against a justice system long accused of targeting black men unfairly. For them, O.J.'s acquittal was bigger than O.J. It was about fighting back against systemic racism, about one man beating a system stacked against him. In white communities, the reaction was almost the opposite. Outrage, disbelief, a sense that a guilty man had walked free. Polls later revealed the racial divide starkly. The majority of black Americans believed O.J. was innocent. The majority of white Americans believed he was guilty. The case had not just divided a courtroom, it had divided a country. Back inside, O.J. turned to the jury, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." His relief was visible, his smile broad. But to Nicole and Ron's families, it was a nightmare. Fred, Goldman's voice shook as he later told reporters, "Justice has not been served. The system let us down." Marcia Clark, exhausted, walked past cameras without a word. Christopher Darden was equally silent, his expression heavy with defeat. For the defense, however, the victory was historic. Johnny Cochran's closing words had sealed the deal. "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." The phrase echoed across America, becoming one of the most famous lines in legal history. As O.J. walked out of the courtroom, a free man, the cameras followed. He waved, smiled, and returned to his Brentwood home. But his freedom came at a cost. He was no longer America's golden boy. Endorsement deals were gone. Acting roles dried up. His reputation was shattered. He was free, but he was also permanently marked. For Nicole and Ron's families, the verdict was not the end. They vowed to continue the fight for justice, turning to civil court. And for America, the trial left a wound that would never fully heal. The O.J. Simpson trial was more than a murder case. It was a turning point in American culture. A collision of celebrity, race, media, and justice. And though the verdict had been read, the story was far from over. Because O.J.'s life after the trial would spiral into scandals, lawsuits, and one last crime that would send him back to court. But this time, the outcome would be very different. The verdict was in. O.J. Simpson had walked free. But freedom didn't mean redemption. The morning after the trial, O.J. woke up in his Brentwood estate no longer as America's hero but as America's most infamous man. A different kind of prison, though the bars of a cell didn't surround him. O.J. soon realized he was trapped in a different kind of cage. He couldn't step outside without reporters swarming. Strangers shouted "murderer" at him in grocery store parking lots. Endorsements disappeared overnight. Once a beloved football icon, he was now toxic in Hollywood, in sports, and even among old friends. He had been found not guilty, but in the court of public opinion, the verdict was split. The civil trial. The story didn't end in criminal court. In 1996, the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against O.J. Unlike the criminal trial, this case didn't require proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It only required a preponderance of evidence. For months, the trial unfolded again painful photos, timelines, testimonies. But this time, the defense didn't have the same firepower. And the jury saw O.J. differently in 1997. The verdict came. O.J. Simpson was found liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The jury awarded the families $33.5 million in damages. For the Goldmans and Browns, it wasn't enough. It could never be enough, but it was something. For O.J., it was financial ruin. A life in exile. O.J. moved to Florida, where state laws protected his NFL pension from being seized in the civil settlement. He lived in a lavish home, still playing golf, still smiling for cameras, as though trying to pretend his life hadn't changed. But everything had changed. He drifted into shady business deals, questionable friends, and desperate money-making schemes. He even agreed to participate in a book called If I Did It, a hypothetical retelling of how the murders might have happened if he had committed them. The book sparked outrage across America. It was seen as tasteless, exploitative, and cruel to the victims' families. Its release was blocked, though years later, the Goldman family would publish it with profits going toward their judgment. Everywhere O.J. went, controversy followed. The Vegas heist. By 2007, O.J. was living like a man on the edge, out of money, out of respect, and out of options. On September 13, 2007, he checked into the Palace Station Hotel in Las Vegas. O.J. had heard that some sports memorabilia dealers were selling items he claimed were stolen from him game balls, awards, even personal photographs. That night, O.J. and a group of men stormed the hotel room where the dealers were staying. Some of his accomplices were armed. They shouted, they threatened, and they gathered the items into bags. For O.J., it was a recovery mission, but to the law, it was armed robbery and kidnapping. The irony was staggering. A man once acquitted of double murder, now facing decades behind bars over sports memorabilia. The second trial, when the trial began in 2008. There were no celebrity dream teams, no televised circus like 1995. This time, O.J. stood mostly alone. The evidence was overwhelming: recordings, eyewitnesses, even O.J.'s own words. And in Las Vegas, there wasn't the same cultural tension that had shaped his Los Angeles trial. The verdict, guilty on all counts. O.J. was sentenced to 33 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 9 years. The number was chilling. It matched, almost poetically, the $33 million judgment from the civil trial. This time, O.J. wasn't walking free. Behind bars prison life, for O.J., was a fall from grace few could have imagined. Once a superstar, now inmate number 1,027,820 at Lovelock Correctional Center in Nevada. Yet, even behind bars, he lived in relative comfort compared to most prisoners. He played softball, coached football for other inmates, signed autographs, and remained the center of attention wherever he went. In 2017, after serving 9 years, O.J. appeared before a parole board. The world watched again. When the board announced parole had been granted, O.J. smiled, relieved. Once again, he walked out of prison a free man, but the freedom was hollow. The shadow that never left. Even now, years after the infamous white Bronco chase and the trial of the century, O.J.'s name carries a shadow. For many, he will forever be the football star who got away with murder. For others, he's the symbol of a justice system divided by race, wealth, and power. And for some, he is simply a fallen icon, proof that no amount of fame can shield you from the weight of your own choices. O.J. Simpson's story didn't end with the not guilty verdict. It twisted and turned from courtrooms to civil trials, from golf courses to prison cells. He had once lived the American dream, and then, in a storm of blood, fame, and tragedy, he had lost it all. The saga of O.J. Simpson didn't just alter one man's life, it reshaped America. When the jury in 1995 declared not guilty, a ripple spread through every corner of the country. For some, it was relief. A black man, long targeted by a system built to oppress, had finally beaten the odds. For others, it was outrage. A man they were convinced had committed to brutal murders had just walked free. The truth was simple. America wasn't just watching the trial of O.J. Simpson. America was watching itself. The trial that became a mirror television, cameras rolled day after day. Millions tuned in, housewives, construction workers, bankers, students, police officers. For nearly a year, it was reality TV before reality TV existed. But what people saw wasn't just court transcripts. They saw race. They saw wealth. They saw gender. They saw the cracks in America's so-called justice system. The trial became a mirror reflecting back an uncomfortable truth. In America, justice wasn't always blind. Race and justice, the verdict, split the nation largely along racial lines. Polls showed that the majority of black Americans believed the jury had reached the right decision, while most white Americans believed O.J. was guilty. It wasn't just about O.J. Simpson. It was about Rodney King, about decades of police brutality, about a history of injustice baked into the very foundation of the system. For many African Americans, O.J.'s acquittal felt like long overdue payback. But for the families of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, it was a devastating loss, proof that celebrity and money could buy freedom even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Two Americas were watching the same trial, but they were seeing two different stories. Media frenzy. The O.J. trial also birthed a new kind of media culture. Cable news discovered the power of the 24-hour cycle. Court TV became a household name. Talk shows, tabloids, and late-night hosts feasted on the story. It wasn't just a trial, it was entertainment. From the moment The white Bronco sped down the freeway. Television executives realized crime could sell. And for decades after, crime stories from Ramsey to Casey Anthony would dominate headlines. Fueled by the O.J. playbook, the victims forgotten lost in the chaos, though, were the real human beings whose lives were cut short. Nicole Brown Simpson beautiful, vibrant, a mother of two. For years, she had lived under the shadow of abuse, her cries for help often ignored until it was too late. Ron Goldman young, energetic, kind-hearted. He was simply returning a pair of sunglasses the night he crossed paths with death. Their names became background noise in the O.J. circus, overshadowed by the fame of the man accused. But their families never stopped reminding the world that they were more than just victims. They were loved, cherished, and missed. Lessons of the trial. So what did America learn from the trial of the century? Justice can be bought. With money, O.J. assembled a dream team of lawyers that most defendants could never afford. The media shapes perception. With every camera angle and nightly debate, public opinion was influenced as much by television as by the evidence. Race is inseparable from justice. The verdict wasn't just about guilt or innocence, it was about history, identity, and trust in institutions. Fame is fragile. O.J. went from beloved icon to global pariah in a matter of months. And yet, perhaps the most haunting lesson was this: even when justice is served, it doesn't always heal. The fall of an icon, O.J. Simpson's story didn't end with the verdict. His later arrest in Las Vegas for armed robbery felt almost like poetic justice to some, karma circling back after years of escape. When he walked out of prison in 2017, older, slower, but still smiling, the world barely noticed. The frenzy was gone, the cameras had moved on. But the shadow of 1995 never left him. O.J. could play golf, give interviews, post on social media, but he would never escape the whisper that followed him everywhere. He got away with murder. The legacy that remains the O.J. Simpson case changed American culture. It transformed news, redefined celebrity trials, and carved deep scars into conversations about race and justice. But beyond the spectacle, beyond the headlines, beyond the endless debates, it left behind undeniable truths. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman never came home. And America never looked at crime, celebrity, or justice the same way again. The story of O.J. Simpson is not just the story of a man. It's the story of a country, its divisions, its obsessions, its flaws, and its fears. And decades later, the echo of that trial still haunts us all.